Okay, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. Today we're doing more Shadow Rising in our Wheel of Time reread. And then we've got some kind of real life stuff to rant about because Sam found something.
Yeah, it's Wheel of Time related. Yeah, it's Wheel of Time related. And that'll be in the spoiler section, but the people that started watching this kind of got on board when we did our woke Wheel of Time TV series. And then we started doing the reread, and some people still followed along. So, obviously there is a little bit of a political bend to it. And I found some really crazy stuff on the internet while I was looking for memes to use as cover photos. I said just Perrin memes, and some crazy stuff came up. And some of it's actually, a lot of it's actually relevant to this book. Just a quick intro, if anybody's listening for the first time, this is Social Distillation. And what we do with our other side of this podcast is try to distill all the media stuff down to what makes the most sense. And so we do cover social and political issues on that one. Now we try to keep this more book related, but we try to bring our expertise to that bend. And I'm a physiologist, researcher by training, but I use it to train athletes and elderly people, and basically what the industry now calls a high-end trainer, which is someone who also has training in psychology and epidemiology and all the other things that you need to cover everything outside of the gym as well as it. So I try to bring that bend to these books as well, because we do talk about what might be going on, personality types inside these people's head. And we've got a lot to talk about with Faile and Perrin, because it is, by today's standards, kind of a dysfunctional relationship. And I think part of that, some of the things we're going to bring up in the stuff I found online, is I think people fail to realize that this is a world that we would have been in 500 years ago, not today, in this nice little air-conditioned room with a car to drive to the store. And if I wanted to, 1,000 girls at my fingertip if I just signed up for Hinge.
Realistically, even, I was going to say 50, and then I realized what year it was and how old I am. But
this would be like right at the edge of the Enlightenment in Europe.
But when you talk about relationships and people and culture, you don't have to go back that far, because even despite the technological innovations of the Industrial Revolution, even in the early days of the feminist movement, like the suffragette movement, things weren't even remotely as radical as what they are now. The relationships and culture of our grandparents and of our grandparents and great grandparents, that era, the pre-World War II era, is still very similar to what had been for centuries.
Well, and part of that's the information age. This has changed everything.
Yeah.
This is really, everybody talks about social media, but this is what makes all of that possible. The invention of the smartphone. And we're going to have to adapt. We adapted to the printing press. It took 75 years or so for that to happen. We adapted to television and radio. It took a little less time for that. And we're in a rapid fire adaptation process to social media, and basically everything at our fingertips, information and the ability to get it out. So we on here aren't possible without all of this. And in the past, everybody's entertainment would have been through reading a book or watching the news and sitcoms and whatever movies were coming up. So we're in an adaptation period there. And this is Heath. That's Heath right there. He is a historian by trade, if you couldn't tell where he immediately went with the conversation. And so he's going to bring that bend to it. I mean, I dabble in history, but I spend most of my time in neuroscience and physiology as well. So, and Heath, before we got on, mentioned this book up here, because it does have kind of a silly name, but it's an excellent book and is so relevant to what we got going on here. And we keep saying we're going to talk about insta love in our spoilers, and we keep forgetting to do it by the time we get there.
Yes, because that is one of the criticisms of not just this Perrin and Faile's relationship, but
everybody in this world.
Yeah.
So we'll go over that, and a lot of the information that we're going to cover is actually in this book, because he goes into the physiological mechanisms all around why we're so stupid when we fall in love or we fall out of love, which is what this is mostly about. But he has to go into how it happens to begin with before he can tell you what happens when it breaks. And that there's a lot of explanation to a lot of the crazy that we've, if you're an adult and you can look back at your life and you've had any kind of love life, you can find all those moments where you're like, why the hell did I do that? And we're seeing a lot of that here. And a lot of the complaints about the books revolve around this. So,
which I find interesting, because a lot of the praise of the books is that Jordan writes women so well and writes the dynamic and interaction between men and women so well.
Which is why this article, one of the articles I found, is so funny, because it says and tries to explain in a bunch of postmodern language exactly how he is the opposite, that he completely doesn't understand the other sex.
All right, well, let's get into see how many chapters we get through before we get to all of that. I should also say that if anyone's new to joining us along here, like Sam said,
oh no, in trying to bring in new people, we just had a technical glitch.
And I decided to do
Heath. You froze on us.
Okay.
And
are we?
My computer is telling me it's on my end. It says internet connection unstable, but I have 4 bars, and I'm about, or 5 bars, and I'm about 10 feet from the actual router. So we'll see how it goes.
All right. Anyway,
so start over.
So if you're just finding us in this is a reread for us. And one of the reasons was because the Prime series was such a train wreck, and we ranted about all the things that didn't work. And so I wanted to go through the book and show why the book works, why it's so engaging, so memorable, and prompts such a large fandom who continually go back to the series. So that's one of the things we try and point out as we go, besides just, the plot and the scenes and what's going on and why we like it. So we're on chapter 28, page 454 on the paperback. And the nonsense, as Perrin sees it, is still going on. Faile insists on 2 separate camps, and even Loyal now is getting annoyed and is trying to put his foot down and say, we're not doing that. But it actually works out better for Perrin if they go separately. And then the 2 interesting things about this scene before he goes into the wolf dream that kind of jumped out to me is similar to when he went into the ways by himself and Gaul says, do you know what you're doing? And he says, no, but no reason for them to know that. And he's kind of doing a similar thing here with the girls having such a fun and lively camp. So he's going to make a faux laugh just to, we'll show you, we can have fun too, even though they're both kind of quiet and miserable as they eat.
Oh, real quick, I wanted to bring up the comments just so I had them ready for later. And one of them was actually relevant to how we opened up here. Because Scott's in the house again. Scott commented, his first comment was, remember, Perrin has a unique perspective. Consider that he's actually been working, and I would say working full time, since he was 11 years old. He was groomed to be responsible. So that is a unique perspective.
That's a good point. And, in this kind of era, or like I say, you don't have to go back that far. My dad grew up on a farm. And so you're doing work, but that's not the same as a job, which is what Perrin was doing. And it doesn't feel the same, which is why a lot of kids who grow up on farms go get other jobs, right? So what Rand was doing was chores, and that's never quite the same. That's just, that's like making your own dinner versus that doesn't make you a chef, right? Or
Yeah.
necessarily even want to be one. But Perrin was working at a business that he was being that he was apprenticed to, which is a whole other level of responsibility.
And I guess we could say about Matt, he was professionally trying to get out of responsibility.
Yes. So 456 kind of jumped up at me too of interesting, and also one of the things that makes Gaul such an interesting side character, and we've talked about Ruark. We'll get to Amos. We've met her very briefly, but we'll get to her. She's another great Aiel character, and certain others can become annoying Aiel characters. But he has a humility which gives him wisdom. That's where a lot of the wisdom of people like Ruark and Amos and the other wise ones and clan chiefs comes from, is knowing what you don't know.
Well, and it's shit. It's a cultural thing, but the reason being because of where they live.
Mm-hmm.
You can't help but be humble when everything around you is so dangerous. Because, I mean, it's just, you realize your place in the world is insignificant because everything is trying to kill you.
Mm-hmm. And we'll see later some primarily Avienda, but then other Aiel who are very scornful of the wetlands. They don't just call them, the wetlands because it's not a giant freaking desert, like the Threefold Land. But it's also an insult because they're soft is the word they use a lot, because it's such a paradise basically from the Aiel perspective. But to Gaul, as he says, we know more of your world than you think and less than we believed. So Gaul is a bit more of a thinker than others, and so he sees the complexities, that it's not all just, oh, these people aren't like us, so they're soft. Yes, it is.
No, well, but there are hints that he's being groomed to be a future clan chief too. So he's already been he's already been kind of picked out for being one of the more mature, wise males of that society. So
yeah, I'd forgotten that's something that the wise ones point out later.
Which makes it extra interesting that he decided to separate from the group.
Oh wait, no, he says it right here. There are some wise ones pointed out later, but then he says it right here, where he goes off on a philosophical soliloquy on 457 about how the world is changing. Kalinda the wise one of Hot Springs Hold tells me I think too much for a stone dog, and Bayer, the eldest wise one of the Sharad, threatens to send me to Ruhudin when Sharon dies, whether I want to go or not. Besides all of that, Perrin, what does the color of a man's eyes matter? Which that's another, you bring my attention to that. That's another interesting thing about Gaul that makes him form such a fast friendship with Perrin, is that I hadn't really thought about this before, but Perrin is now doubly self-conscious because he's always been self-conscious about his size and strength. That's why he's a gentle giant, because he's always been self-conscious about being much bigger and stronger than the other kids. So he had to take extra care because he didn't want to accidentally hurt anybody. And now he's doubly self-conscious because he's got these creepy wolf yellow eyes. So people don't have to know about, if they knew the full extent of the wolf, that he could talk to wolves, they'd, freak out and think he's a witch, of the dark one, as the white cloaks do. But he can hide that part of it. He can't hide the eyes, and people react to them, but Gaul and most of the other Aiel don't. And the Aiel, just because that's kind of how they are, and Gaul because he's philosophical about it. All right, so now we get into kind of the meaty part of this chapter, which is him bouncing around in the wolf dream because he wants to go scouting and get a lay of the land and figure out what's going on. Also because, they saw some creepy things he saw some creepy things when they came out of the Waygate, flocks of ravens, which are, ravens and crows are a bad sign in this world.
Mm-hmm.
So
do we get it in Tenchico where the insects are everywhere? Or is that later on?
I don't remember when we first see that.
Because we kind of shot through the girls so quickly that I forgot to look at that part. It was either Tanchico or Ibudar that.
Like it may be Ibudar, and then things get even creepier and creepier as the series goes on, and the Dark One is able to make its influence felt in the world more and more and more. But we have seen that where the shadow is strong in the world, there will be physical manifestations. So I think we have seen already that in a place where a Forsaken is, the rats are even worse than usual.
Mm-hmm.
So along with the nightmares that we pointed out in Ilion, I think at that point they also make reference to the rats being worse than ever. So that is an element that goes along, that the creatures of the Dark One become more powerful if the Dark One's power is focused in an area. And as Gaul was saying there before Perrin goes to sleep, is, as they were talking, you really think it's a coincidence that we ran into these Trollocs in this Murdral at the Waygate exit here. So something funky is going on here.
Mm-hmm.
All right, but before he goes around scouting, he gets one of those weird visions. He kind of he has the ability to be like a dreamer, but he's awake and conscious in the wolf dream. And actually, this happened to Egwene too, didn't it? Or has this happened yet?
I think it did happen to her. Yeah, she saw Matt rolling dice.
Yes, because she saw that the first time she actually went into the world of dreams. So this has happened to her too. That one of the interesting things to me about it here, and that so Perrin really, we've talked about this, about Perrin's acceptance of who and what he is more so than the other two Ta'veren. But as Scott pointed out, he's the conflict here, and the reason he seems to not fully accept is because he's accepted the Ta'veren part of it, but he's very slow to accept the wolf part of it, that the wolf part is part of it.
Well, he accepts it. I think accept is the wrong term. He accepts it but he wants to control it. And by control it, he wants to block it out.
It's the hammer and the axe.
Yeah.
For him, the wolf part of it is the axe, that it is a necessary tool, but a dangerous one that he doesn't really like. And so he's going into the wolf dream, which is part of he's embracing the wolf part of it, but because it's a necessary tool that he needs to have a look around and make sure they're safe. and see what's going on. But the visions he has, I think we've seen all of these already. So
well, we'll see the Rand one at the end of this book.
We haven't talked about it, but no, if you're reading along here, the Rand one, actually, does he leave? Does he come out yet? No, you're right. Is the last thing we see about Rand is when they just leave Ruhadin, but he hasn't showed the thingy yet. But we have a hint of what that will be from the very end of The Dragon Reborn, when Ruark shows the marking on his arm. So we've got
now with since we've talked about the girls already, with the Nynaeve and Elaine one, I'm wondering if the dangerous beast is a spider, Mohidian.
I think so.
Or it could be something that they encounter in Ibu Dar that we get introduced to.
I don't think so, because we haven't had a hint that that's what that is. I think this is referring to Tanchico. Although it could be both. You're right, actually. That this could be what's going on with them right now and what's to come.
Yeah, I'm trying to piece it together, because it says they are hunting a dangerous beast. But realistically, in both of those situations, they're being hunted by a dangerous beast. So
that's a good point. They are both. Well, they're hunting the Black Ajah, and they don't know that they are being hunted. But when Nynaeve figures it out, she becomes incensed and makes herself the hunter. Matt, you saw this right before we got to these chapters, is he flips a coin and then he goes into the doorway and comes out with the hat and the spear.
So that already happened. This is not going chronologically. Kind of throw me off a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. So I find that interesting that we've basically already seen all this, which very rarely happens when we get these dreams and visions and foretellings and whatnot, is stuff that we already know about.
It's almost like the wolf dream gave Perrin an update on what's going on in the world.
Yeah, the other thing that I found interesting and that kind of got me off on that tangent in the first place is what I was going to say is, I don't think he ever does this again, never realizes that he triggered it. He seems to have triggered it. As though thinking of the oddities triggered one of them, a patch of sky against the mountains darkened suddenly. Well, the only one we haven't really seen yet is it kind of sort of happens right before Rand goes into Ruhadin, before it switches back to his perspective. But Egwene and a woman with long white hair were staring at him in surprise, while behind them the White Tower crumbled stone by stone. Now we skipped over those. I was going to plug those in when we talked about Rand's storyline. Is the couple of chapters where we bounce back to Min in the tower, the White Tower, and I can't remember exactly where that happens chronologically, but we've certainly by this point seen the beginnings of it. We know that trouble is brewing there, and we know that Egwene is being trained by the Wise Ones in dreaming.
Well, we've already talked about Min's visions there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the look of surprise makes me wonder if that's actually them doing something else, and all of a sudden, like a window opens for them as well, and they're looking down on Perrin, because that seems like an actual reaction.
Well, which there's a little bit of inconsistency here, because if that's the case, there's no surprise he would think of Egwene as he's thinking of Matt and Rand and all of these people from his childhood. But when he thinks of Elias, nothing happens. So unless Elias just doesn't happen to be asleep at the time or something along those lines. But that was one thing. He's thinking about these things and triggering things, but he does think of Elias. And do we ever see Elias in the wolf dream? I don't think so.
I don't want to answer that here.
Oh, okay. All right. Spoiler section.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he's looking for Hopper because he needs help and he needs answers. He goes bouncing around looking for stuff. And oh, that's right. The other thing he saw was that somebody killed a hawk, which was part of the Ravens. It wasn't just the Ravens. Somebody had shot an arrow at a hawk, which he found odd because despite what people think, farmers don't just go around killing wild animals unless it's threatening their stock.
Mhm.
And out here, there's no farmers. That would be a hunter. And, why would someone just randomly shoot a hawk? So that gave him the creeps because, it's wrong. It's why you get the creeps when you hear that somebody tortures animals for fun, because that ain't right. And so he finds this space, and then bouncing around leads him to Slayer, who he doesn't know is Slayer yet, but he catches his scent and instinctively goes on the attack because his scent is so wrong. Where was it? Yeah. So he sees someone, which is odd, seeing somebody else, and the other guy sees him and then hesitates. Oh, here it is. The wind rose and Perrin caught his smell faintly, a cold scent. That was the only way to describe it. Cold and not really human. And so instinctively his bow is in his hand with an arrow knocked. And then the other man sees him and they go chasing off after each other. And now Hopper finally finds him when he reaches the Tower of Genji. And this is something else you may want to point out in spoilers of Slayer happening to disappear right here by the tower. But I like that this is where Perrin does kind of embrace the wolf part, even though he doesn't want to, but instinctively it's as much as, and it's kind of a foreshadowing of what's about to happen in Perrin's storyline, that he's incensed, that he is instinctively protective of the wolves. I mean, we saw it a little bit in The Dragon Reborn when I think it's Uno says something about at least we'll be warm, the wounded will be warm, we can skin the wolves for blankets, and Perrin just growls at him.
He'll be he made him bury him with the other.
Yep. And then we saw it when it was either Bane or Chiad was making comments about having a wolf pelt, and he just growled at her. And now he's so incensed that as he says and thinks, because to him the wolf dream is a sanctuary. It is a sanctuary for wolves. This is a place to get away from the struggle, the fight or die real world. The dog eat dog, sometimes literally real world. And here you have an idyllic place where you can just, roam and run free and not have to worry about those kinds of things. And so not only has someone killed a wolf, but killed them here in this idyllic sanctuary for wolves. 461, as he says, men have killed wolves and wolves men. Why does anger seize your throat like fire this time? I don't know, Perrin said slowly. Maybe because it was here. I didn't know it was possible to kill a wolf here. I thought wolves were safe in the dream. You chase Slayer, young bull. He is here in the flesh and he can kill. So Hopper explains a little bit about what that means of being in the flesh.
Mhm. Well, he doesn't really know a whole lot about that, but
Yeah, because he
Yeah.
doesn't know the philosophy and the mechanisms and all that. He's a wolf. He's acting on instinct here in the dream, in the wolf dream.
which is again, it brings us to our metaphysics, is what is the dream world? And well, maybe this is another one we can go more in on spoilers, but Jordan makes hints that Matt is someone important reborn. In fact, he almost says straight out that he is. And Rand is obviously loose there and reborn. And the heroes are tied to the wheel and they're in the world of dreams when they're not in the real world.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, so what does this mean for Perrin? Is he a wolf reborn as a human? Or something along those lines? It's kind of like, how is the dream world this hub for reincarnation? Because it is hinted that only the heroes are tied to it, but at the same time everybody's a reincarnated version of something in the Wheel of Time world. So it's again, what's the significance that he is a wolf brother when it comes to the world of dreams? And the fact that if they die there, it's done, there is no more. And that's the part where it's okay, so now we're getting the significance of the world of dreams and all these alternate lives.
And he doesn't know. So because Hopper just kind of acts on instinct, he doesn't know how to explain that the tower is super dangerous. It just is. But then Birgit shows up and she does explain.
Convenient.
Convenient. But I don't remember where it was. Somewhere it's said, and maybe Scott or if anyone else wants to actually comment, remembers what I'm talking about here. Somewhere it said that if you're a strong enough dreamer, or maybe the hero specifically, Birgit specifically, that they somehow know when someone else is in the world of dreams and knows that they're there, which is the other caveat, because we've seen, and a little bit of it has been explained so far, that anyone can accidentally touch the world of dreams while they're dreaming, but to them it's just an extra real dream. That's what an extra real dream is. And then you disappear. You're there for a minute, and then you're gone. But if you know you're there, you somehow give off this, aura or something, and you can be found. I think Birgit explains that, if not in this book, maybe it's in the next book, about how she can find them. But I'm mostly sure I'm not just making that up in my crazy head. But the other part of it is she kind of points out, is that she may also just be drawn to him for the same reason that she's talking to him.
Mm-hmm.
As she just grumbles about how she keeps breaking the precepts, and that's it. Are you Ta'veren? So she explains, and this is amusing to me, because this is setting up something way down the line of, this is another reason the book works so well, is because there's so much setup and payoff that even if you don't make the connections immediately and consciously, it's there in your head that she's talking about. Now, we already know some of it, because we know about the Elfin and the Eilfin. We know about both of them now, and we know about the rules, what is it called, the bargain, or the what do they call it? No, the bargain is what the
She says the dealings.
The dealings. Yeah. So courage to strengthen, fire to blind, music to daze, iron to bind. And we've seen from when Matt has gone into the doorways and they ask that question, have you brought any of these things? And so we know a little bit about this world already, but this is well, and we've seen Matt's second dealing where he finds out just how dangerous it can be, because it seemed weird and creepy the first time he went in. The second time he went in, it was nearly deadly. And so we're getting a little bit of that, which right now seems like post hoc explanation is actually setting things up for way down the line. So I don't get into any more of that.
Yeah.
You know, need to cut that off. I do enjoy the partly it's just plain fun, but it also shows kind of the power that Birgit has in the world of dreams, that she was only appearing to Perrin, which makes sense because Perrin is kind of getting freaked out because he can tell that someone else is there. He saw a shadow of a broad man with two sword hilts sticking up one over each shoulder, and we know who that is. But he doesn't even appear because he's a stickler for the prescripts. So Geidel Kane is making himself invisible, and only Birgit sees and hears him, and only Perrin sees and hears Birgit. And it's a wonder you weren't attacked by chipmunks, Perrin muttered. What did you make of her? Her, a she. Hopper stood looking around. Where? You made noises at the wind, young bull. There was no she here, none but you and I. So I think this may also give Perrin a bit of a hint to come way later about the power of the world of dreams and how he can control it more. Because he's very good about seeing and then doing. Which is good because Hopper can't explain it any other way. Because he's an animal, and that's how, you know, cubs learn, is they learn through play and through watching the older ones do what they do, and then they copy. And then of course the close of the chapter, good old-fashioned Aiel fatalism. Gaul, the owl, raised his head. It may be worse in the two rivers than I thought. Things often are, Gaul replied quietly. It is the way of life. Okay. Any more thoughts on that before we get to homecoming?
Well, just that to continue that thought, not only did he just randomly, flippantly say, that's how it is, he fell right to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
You know, let me tell you something stressful. We're probably going to our death, but it's probably worse than I even thought. Okay.
It's
one thing to say words. It's another thing to actually be able to relax enough to fall asleep.
One of my favorite lines from one of my favorite movies. Somebody wake up Hicks. Sure, we're going into something, you know, unknown and scary and potentially deadly, but I should get some sleep because I might not be able to sleep later.
And then you get, it's like our meme on the cover last time. First time?
All right, so chapter 29. I like that since we're getting Perrin's perspective here as he's getting ready to leave, we get, you know, the things are coming to a head in Perrin's mind. So he's in full-on rationalization mode of, I'm gonna get up, I'm gonna very, very quietly leave. Faile is still asleep. I'm not gonna wake her. I'm just gonna go do this. And because she tricked Loyal, she tricked me, she, you know, so it's full-on rationalization. She was going to make everything worse, make it harder. He wished he could kiss her again. He wished she would decide she had had her fill of him and go. Why did she have to be so stubborn? So we get these the conflicting emotions and thoughts in his mind, because he's, as far as he's concerned, he's willingly walking to the gallows. But first he stops in at the Althor farm because it's on the way, and it's a wreck and burned. But he and Gaul are able to find some tracks to know that, people made it out.
We kind of circle back to where it all began, because then we get on the quarry road and
yeah. So they catch up, and again, Faile is kind of being mean to him, but it's a strategy. She does instinctively, reflexively care for him, and there are times where, she's not going to play the game when it's not appropriate. And so here, 468, Loyal had dismounted at the edge of the fruit trees, but his head was still in the branches. Faile rode toward Perrin, studying his face, her mare stepping delicately. Do you know the people who lived here? Rand and his father. Oh, I thought it might be. The relief and sympathy in her voice were enough to finish the sentence. Does your family live near? No, he said curtly, and she recoiled as if slapped, but she still watched him, waiting. So he's still, despite all the rationalization and conflict in his mind in the morning, he's still trying to push her away, and she ain't no dummy. She knows that. It still hurts that she won't talk to him, confide in him, and is still trying to push him away. But I think she gets it. I mean, by the simple fact that she's not staying silent because, she's scared or cowed or a dummy and doesn't know what to say. She understands what he's doing. What we got from her short perspective when she goes after Bear Lane, that she fully understands what he's doing.
Yeah. On this reread, and then with my interwebs searches last night or yesterday, there's so much Faile hate out there that I almost feel the need to defend her. It's so bad. And it's like, it's this hatred thrown at her that actually you see that same trait in the people writing the articles.
Yeah.
It's are you so mad at her because you're looking into a mirror? But we've talked about personality disorders before, and that same person on that spectrum can be a productive member of society, and those actually are skills for good, or can be a manipulative bitch in this case. And she, through being raised by her parents, ended up on the positive side of where those skills come into place. And him being Tavaren probably brought her in. She was exactly what he needed, because that was the part of him that he didn't have. It's I think, did I share the meme before that it was the introvert that ordered something and it came out different, and their extrovert friend, he said no tomatoes, and in the other side he's going, it's okay, I'll just pick them off, so it's the positive version of what we would call possibly a personality disorder in our luxury nowadays.
Yeah.
It's like the same thing as why would evolution allow psychopaths, right? Well, let's go back in time when resources were limited, and if you were a Scandinavian, they were very limited because it's cold. You needed that person who's willing to go sail across a small sea, raid a village, and take their resources, or else your village doesn't survive. You need it. It doesn't mean it's happy or good or fun that someone's going and killing and raping and pillaging children, but it allowed that society to survive. So you needed that 3 or 4% of the population to be able to do that without caring, to take care of all the 97% that can't do it for themselves.
What's interesting about the Faile hate to me is I've always seen her as very similar to Nynaeve. And I didn't like Nynaeve in the first several books of the series because she's an annoying, pushy bully. But you get a number of Nynaeve perspectives. So you eventually grow to understand her. You don't get a lot of Faile perspective, especially early on. We get that one short one here when she goes after Berylane. And it's a really long time before we get any more Faile perspective.
Well, one of the critiques surrounded the fact that said it infantilizes her and it makes her seem like a spoiled child. And this post was like 5 years old, so it's no point in posting a response. But I just want to scream at the computer and say, she is a child. She is not she's an adult in the making at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Just like Perrin does stupid things like a young boy would do.
Elaine, we see the same thing from Elaine. She has a good head on her shoulders, but she does have blind spots because she was raised in the utmost of privilege, in the actual definition of the word, that's how it's used now. So she does come across as spoiled sometimes because she has certain expectations because of how she was raised.
I just wanted to, of course, these perspectives that I found were, of course, someone who loved it as a young adult or an adolescent, and apparently they went to college and learned how it was bad in every way.
Yeah,
and
that's what college is for now.
Yeah, that's what college is for. It's the meme where the kid walks into the room and he says, "Y'all are all racist, misogynist, blah 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 blah," and then the man sitting on the couch with his wife says, I paid $200,000 for that. And but no, it's I just wanted to be like, have you ever spent time around 16 and 17-year-old girls? They're silly.
Oh yeah,
they're very silly. I had for several years in a row, I had 2 classes a day of 8 girls apiece from the volleyball team. They were all silly girls, perfectly normal girls. But when they're all around each other doing their girl things, I was just like, oh, the whole time. The
dog loves it when one of my daughter's friends comes over because it's someone new that he can run around and get pets from. But if 3 or 4 friends come over, he comes in here and hides.
Yeah, you've got a good perspective on this because you do have a young female daughter.
Mm-hmm.
What, she's 18,
16 now.
16 now? 16 now. Oh God.
Yep.
Ugh.
Yep. All right. Well, getting back to it, try and get through at least this chapter, if not the next one. And Gaul ain't no dummy either. We've already established he's a thinker. 468. Galbu after camp close by tonight. I want to start early in the morning. He sneaked a glance over his shoulder. Faile was riding back to Loyal, sitting stiff in her saddle. In Emonds Field, they will know where the white cloaks were so he could turn himself in before they hurt his family. If his family was all right. If the farm where he had been born was not already like this. No, he had to be in time to stop that. They'll know how things are. Early then, Gaul hesitated. You will not drive her off. That one is almost far Darismai. And if a maiden loves you, you cannot escape her, however hard you run. You let me worry about Faile. He softened his voice. It was not Gaul he wanted to be rid of. Very early, while Faile is still asleep. So I think kind of the maidens, Bane and Chiad might not know what's going on here because they're maidens. They've about the time they should have started paying attention to boys, they were starting to learn how to wield the spear. And that's what they're young women, but they don't really know the intricacies of male-female relations. So they might not know what's going on here, which is why they may want to get Perrin alone and teach him a lesson because he's so mean to Faile. But Gaul gets it. He sees it. I do wonder how much Loyal sees, because he also doesn't really know relationships and doesn't know humans all that well, although he is learning. That's just a random side thought.
Yeah, we'll probably get to that, because that is actually part of the feminist rant I found.
Well, that may be a good place to end it here at the end of this chapter, because we get some of that. We get some more of that as he sneaks in through the back of the inn. And
we meet the Alviers, who Master Alvier was not skinny, Rafe.
Never trust a skinny innkeeper. But we get more of both of their personalities, which we've already seen a little bit of. And I love the abruptly realizing that Gaul was just standing there, he made hasty introductions. Bran blinked when Gaul was named Aiel and frowned at his spears and his black veil hanging down his chest from his shrufa. But his wife merely said, "Be welcome to Emonds Field, Master Gaul, and to the Winespring Inn." "May you always find water and shade, roof mistress," Gaul said, formally bowing to her. "I asked leave to defend your roof and hold." She barely hesitated before replying, as if that were exactly what she was used to hearing. "A gracious offer, but you must allow me to decide when it is needed." "As you say, roof mistress, your honor is mine." From under his coat, Gaul produced a gold salt cellar, a small bowl balanced on the back of a cunningly made lion, and extended it to her. "I offer this small gift to your roof." So she's very smooth, very used to dealing with people. I mean, Bran is too, because he's not only the innkeeper but the mayor, but he's a completely different kind of personality. Mr. Salvaire is the ultimate archetypal mothering figure. We even get that from some of Rand's perspectives, thinking about how she treated him, especially how she treated him and how she treated Tam after his wife died. But even she can't ignore an Ogier and two more Aiel maidens. But I want to skip there. All right, so where is it? All right, so 472 is where Perrin finally says out loud what we all know. "I cannot. You know they are after me, or you'd not want me to go." And they had not commented on his eyes, even to ask if he was ill. Mr. Salvaire had barely been surprised. They knew. "If I give myself up, I can stop some of it. I can keep my family." He jumped as the hall door banged open to admit Faile, followed by Bane and Shiad. Where is it? Give yourself up. Give yourself up. Have you been planning this from the start? You have, haven't you? You utter idiot. Your brain has frozen solid, Perrin Ibira. It was nothing but muscle and hair to begin with, but now it isn't even that. If white cloaks are hunting you, they will hang you if you surrender to them. Why would you want that? Because I killed white cloaks. Looking down at her, he ignored Mr. Salvaire's gasp. Those the night I met you, and two before that. They know about those two, Faile, and they think I'm a dark friend. They believe it to be true. You are no more a dark friend than I. The sun could be a dark friend first. It makes no difference, Faile. I have to do what I have to do. You addle-brained lummox. You don't have to do any such crack-pate thing. You goose-brain. If you try it, I'll hang you myself. Perrin, Mr. Salvaire said quietly, would you introduce me to this young woman who thinks so highly of you? And then Faile's face went bright red when she realized she had been ignoring Master and Mr. Salvaire, and she began making elaborate curtsies and offered flowery apologies. I kind of, we overthink everything because Jordan sets up so much stuff. You have to wonder how much is on purpose. I kind of feel like what the way I read this is that Mistress Alver, she says what she says in the way she says it, not just as a way to kind of disarm the situation. But we have a young woman traveling with a young man, and she's so over the top agitated that Perrin would even think about turning himself into the White Cloaks knowing it's a death sentence. She can tell that Faile feels for Perrin. And so I think that's she's saying the quiet part out loud is part of disarming the situation, because I think she, as a mother, as a grown woman, of a mother of daughters, I think she sees what's going on here.
Well, and you use the important word mother. She is diffusing the situation between children acting like children. There's just more on the line. When we do stupid things as adults, it's not that we're not being childish. It's just that there's adult repercussions on the other end of it. And in this case, life and death repercussions. So
Yeah.
She's still being the mother. It's different. It's the same, but not the same, but different. Is that where you wanted to end the non-spoiler section?
Well, let's get to the end of the chapter. I love the 474. Mare and Alver, on the other hand, took it all in stride, treating Faile and Bane and Chiad the same as any other young woman travelers who came into her, and commiserating with them over how tiring traveling was, complimenting Faile on her riding dress, and telling the Aiel women how she admired the color and sheen of their hair. Perrin suspected that Bane and Chiad at least did not know quite what to make of her. Anyway, but where is it? So 475, and this is where the plans of Perrin and again, this is, I don't get the Faile hate. I understand finding her grating at times, but 475.
Well,
Perrin,
I'm going to tell you why it's understandable to have the hate, but it's, how we overthink everything. It's the fact that people aren't thinking.
Yes.
Yeah.
But to me, this is a scene that is so redeeming of her. When Bran says, Perrin, your family is gone. Gone? You mean the farm is burned? And he doesn't get it. They are dead, my boy. And he still doesn't get it. He doesn't want to get it. It's a great scene because it goes on just long enough for you to see how upended Perrin becomes. Perrin, methodical thinker, planner, and he doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know what to say. He's completely out of sorts, and it is uncharacteristic, so uncharacteristic of him that you can really get the emotion of the scene. You can feel it along with him. But then I like the way the scene ends, with, again, Faile getting mad, but for good purpose. Whereas it's at the very end of the chapter.
Well, let's rewind for a second, because sorry, I actually never could read this part without tearing up a little bit. We've talked before about crying in movies and stuff, and I know you're not, but I cry in movies a lot. But to analyze this a little bit more, this is what makes Perrin so scared about his strength and the wolf. And it's the Perrin frowned as wetness suddenly slopped over his hand, stared at the crumpled cup, though wondering where it had come from. He knows when emotion takes him, he destroys things. And he's big and strong enough and powerful enough to do so. And what the wolf brings in him is actually a moment of being in the moment emotionally, where, you know, I hate that they tried to bring Dungeons and Dragons into this and they make him the berserker, but it is kind of that same mentality though, where he does lose himself, and he knows every time he loses himself, he can hurt people.
It's back to what's prompted all this. It's why the Prime series is garbage and doesn't work, because they try to smash all of this into one brief scene that is dumb and nonsensical and has no emotional impact, because we haven't bothered to meet this wife that they invented for him.
Yeah. And it's truly, that had nothing to do with rage.
Yeah. It was the chaos of the situation.
Rafe says he wanted it to show the rage, but it was you're in a bar fight. If anybody's ever been
against literal giant monsters,
if anybody's ever been in a fight period where you know your opponent, it's still more chaotic than you would expect. But you be around a lot. The rule of a bar fight is hit then look. You know, if you ever start a bar fight with me, you're on your own, dude. Because
I'm not getting in the middle of all that.
I'm surviving. You know, if you come up and tap me on the shoulder while I'm in the middle of a fray, I might turn and punch you before I think about it. So that's what that showed in that scene. It didn't show rage. It showed someone who's never been in a fight before defending themselves against Trollocs.
He wasn't enraged. He was more scared.
Yeah, it was. Things happen fast, man. He wasn't a trained warrior. There were Trollocs all around him in every direction, and he was reacting to the next thing that moved. That's not a rage. Now, in the books, as he progresses and he becomes a great fighter because of the wolf, then we see him knowing that he could do great damage when he's not in his right mind. The problem is, in a fight, that actually benefits him, because you can't sit there and think about everything in a fight. You can't strategery your way through a fight. You might have a game plan going in, but that just controls the first couple moves. This isn't chess. This isn't football. This is moment to moment changes of plan, which is why Matt's the best fighter. And Perrin gets that way because he loses his conscious self when he fights. So, I think that was a good example of why he knows he can do stuff, because he just crushed a metal cup with his hand when he was in a moment of not being in his right mind
and was confused by it.
What
happened here? So 478, the end of the chapter, is where Faile ends it with, "I have had enough," she announced. Perrin frowned as she stood and came around the table to him. Seizing his head, she pulled his face into her midriff. "Your mother is dead," she said quietly. "Your father is dead. Your sisters are dead, and your brother. Your family is dead, and you cannot change it. Certainly not by dying yourself. Let yourself grieve. Don't hold it inside where it can fester." There's no more, as I mentioned last time, got The Art of War over on a shelf here somewhere, and a teacher or professor who first introduced it to me, called it the best relationship guide ever written. And that's because that's how Faile is approaching her relationship with Perrin. That's why she's doing what she's doing. It's a stratagem. Okay, but no more of that, because now Perrin is in serious, legitimate grief, or at least he should be. He has been given kind of the worst news you can be given. Not just a family member is dead, your whole family is dead. And she's, to your point, what seems like bullying isn't. It's just her trying to being complimentary, trying to help Perrin be the best self that he can be because she has such a different extroverted personality. And Perrin has to construct you know, a system within his own mind. He has to have these plans. Everything is a blacksmith puzzle to him. So he's all right. All my family is dead. What's going on? What do? I have to have something to do. I have to have a plan. I have to have steps. And no, stop being yourself and just let go for a second, because you have to. Otherwise, as she says, it will fester. And she's absolutely right. And she's a much more emotional person, but she's also smart enough to get that. And so she drops the pretense, she drops the game, and it's all about caring for Perrin and helping him in this moment.
This is one area that I'm more like Perrin, because I remember when my sister passed away, I went, I took the days off to go to the funeral, but I went back to work, and everybody there was like, take some time off, take some time off, take some time off. And, I kept fighting back with, no, I have to be busy. This actually helps. This actually helps me cope. I need to be busy. What good is, what memorial are you setting by being lazy because someone passed away? Things like that. So I actually had to do that. It kind of made me feel better, but it eventually kind of broke through. And so there's actually, I make friends with the bartenders in the areas because I go to a lot of bars. But there's one, if I walk in on 3/11, March 11th, she pours me a shot right away, because she knows that's the day that I just kind of let it all hang out, because that's the day she passed away. So 3/11 is when she passed away. And so I go to that bar, and she pours me a shot, and she pours one for herself and lets me sit there. And I needed that. She understood that. And so she was a little bit like Faile, here, this is your grieve time. I'm not going to even mess around. I'm not going to cheer you up. I'm not going to joke around. And it took a couple of years for me to figure that out.
Yeah.
But let's take a quick bathroom break, and let's go into spoilers.
Yep. Good plan. That's a good comment.
All right. Sorry to leave us on a somber note for when we ended the regular part. So, but it was very fitting, because that is one of the saddest scenes in entertainment right there. I mean, I can't even imagine.
And again, it works because it's set up so well.
I read one of Jonathan Haidt's books recently, and in there he talks about basically how we adapt to tragedy and the mental state behind it. And everybody talks about what would be the worst thing and the best thing that could happen to your life. And he used the idea of winning the lottery as like this awesome thing. And several months later, after that initial happiness happens, basically people baseline. And you're just as depressed or whatever worried you were before. And the same thing happens in reverse. And he used the example of being paralyzed from the neck down. People say that'd be the worst thing that could happen to me. And when it comes to actually the results of that, 3, 4, 5 months later, people hit a baseline and they end up living a normal life again, just paralyzed. But that's not the worst. If someone quizzed me, what would be the worst thing that could happen to you? It wouldn't be paralyzed from the waist down. It would be something tragically permanent happening to my son. I only got one. I can only have one, because I've made sure I can't have any more. And if something happened to him where he was no longer with us, that would be the worst thing that I could ever even imagine. And now we've got a guy finding out everybody in his family has passed away.
Yeah. And you see that when what kind of starts to roll it downhill is more than just, I mean, there were multiple generations living in that house. And so it's bad enough when your grandparents die, but they're grandparents, they're older. And then when your parents die, okay, that now we're getting worse because, they were younger, but they're still older than you. What really gets the ball rolling downhill is with his siblings, especially his younger brother, that really kind of does him in, if you will. And so there's a it's really analogous there with parents and children is what really cuts deep. And you see it, you hear it with people who it has happened to, and they talk about is parents who outlive their children.
And there's actually, the data suggests there's an optimal age for the maximum grief with that, and that's when the child is becoming an adolescent. And we can go and it's from an evolutionary standpoint, that's when your child is being able to have children. And so the optimal age to have the maximum grief is if your child passes when they're entering adolescence. And that's just, I mean, it's that's where I'm at right now. My kid's 12, and they're about to go on a trip to Colorado. And I hate to be a helicopter parent, and I'm not going because I'm working that week. I saved my trip for our trip to England that we have coming up. But the person that owns the condo told me there's a female moose hanging out with her 2 children by the condo. And she said, it's great because you can see them from the balcony and everything. And I'm like, they better check before they walk out of the front door, because Mama Moose is not going to be happy when baby moose are around and
while they taste like cow, they're a lot meaner than a cow.
Well, they're
a lot more territorial.
Are aggressive. They're aggressive. Now, consequently in New Jersey, you wouldn't think about it because everybody thinks of city when they think of New Jersey. But New Jersey has an out of control bear population right now, and apparently they're having an excess number of people dying of mauled by bear up there.
I got some rants about that next time we want to talk about,
because it's because of hunting laws.
Government intervention or lack thereof.
But if I'm going to pick a way to die, dying by fire is probably the number one I don't want. But mauled by carnivorous animal is number 2, because typically they start eating before they're done killing. They just pin you down and start eating. That would probably be number 2.
The only way to go like that would be to a big cat, because they go for the neck and kill it first, either by snapping the neck or by choking it out.
I would it's not smart to run anyways, because they can chase you down. And they say make yourself big, but realistically, that's the best strategy, even if you're going to die, because at least fighting back, they will kill you faster. Whereas if you run, they just might get your hindquarters and start eating.
I got some rants on that. But so before we get too far down the morbid,
this got look, Elias and the Wolf Dream. This segues into that.
But I do want to reference something I thought of when you were talking about the, winning the lottery versus being paralyzed. If you want a really good example of that, to see that in real life, the History Channel has been crap for a really long time, but every once in a while,
Vikings.
Every once in a while they put out something good. And they did a series a while back called The War Fighter, where they focused on actual stories of special operators in the war on terror in Iraq and Afghanistan. And some of them are mauled. They are, paralyzed. They lose limbs from IEDs or whatever. And you get to hear these people talk. And it is, for most people, it is unthinkable how positive they are.
I got to work with one. He blew off his leg. And it was a gun accident, actually. He blew off his leg from the knee down. And part of his recovery process is his mother was a client of mine. And she's like, hey, can I bring him to the gym and just we hang out? And he was still in a bandage that would bleed every once in a while. This is how close to the incident we were. And I just worked out a way he could work out. And his mood when he walked in versus when he
Mm.
left was that was one of those days where you're like, this is why I do what I do. You know, it's one of those that was so obvious. You just have that glow about you as well as them. So yeah, it's amazing what traumatic events can bring out of people for good or bad.
All right. So you want to do comments, or do you want to do Elias and the Wolf Dream?
Let's do comments first.
Okay.
All
So,
right. Which you're gonna just start at the top?
Yeah, this is a really good point from Scott and really spoilery.
He's got a lot
well,
on there, so
half
read
and
out
half.
where you're starting. Yeah.
So we already talked about the first one about Perrin's unique perspective, because
Mhm.
he's been working an actual job since he was 11 years old, which is about the 11 or 12 years old is about the time he would be apprenticed in this kind of a system. So child buyer, this is a really good comment, has convinced himself that he witnessed things that didn't happen. And that's what he reports to his superior officers. That may be the definition of dogmatic. That is actually a really good definition, that he has convinced himself that he not just that things are true. So like that the children have a Bible and they have convinced themselves that that is true. But more than that, the real dogmatic ones, because we actually see from Galad, from his point of view, that much like holy texts today, it's quite possible they have convinced themselves what they think about it is true rather than it is actually true, because Galad kind of has a different take on it when he starts reading the book. But so he convinces himself those things are true, but then he goes a step further, that I must have seen this because this must be true to fit into my very narrow worldview. And we're going to see that again and again several times as we run back into child buyer.
Yeah, I mean, you can even see this on a micro level. Working in a job where you're convincing people to do things they don't want to do. I don't know how many times I've looked somebody in the eye, said something to them, shown them something, and then repeated it while it's written on a board right next to them. And they look at me when they do it wrong or say it or start doing something differently. They look at me like I never said what I said when I start correcting them. This is something that happens in real time right there, but they're starting to do what they wanted to hear. And it's just like, I see that every day. So it doesn't surprise me when we have a political discussion or something where somebody just completely hears what they want to hear. Because now we've got a belief system also with it, not just what I want to be doing right now or not doing what I don't want to do. And yeah, child buyer is almost a caricature of that. I would say almost I say almost a caricature because we do see it in real life.
Yes, we do. We absolutely do. And, to the extreme of him, which is way down the line, way spoiler, like in one of the last couple of books, is Buyer is directly confronted with Perrin isn't who you have convinced yourself he is. And he can't see it. He can't let it go. Mm-hmm. And yet young Bornhold, who's
the one whose actual father died.
Yeah, the actual victim here, he does. Now, he's still conflicted about it. He's still upset about it, rightfully so, but he has enough cognition to recognize, okay, I don't know exactly what is what, but I know that what I thought isn't true. Well, and Buyer can never do that.
And this is the power of disgust. So Buyer has succumbed to everything not White Cloak is disgusting. It is not pure. And so it does not take much for him to just go down that road of this needs to be eliminated. He is the definition of a zealot.
Yeah.
And a zealot that will do bad things in the name of. And when you're talking about other people, then you need those other people to be to hit that disgust reaction that we talk about so
Yeah.
much.
All right. So next, Rand has probably at this point read more translations and commentary about the prophecies than she has. I assume she is Moraine. I don't know about that, but he's certainly read a lot. And again, he comes with a unique perspective because he doesn't have any of the baggage that Moraine has.
Yeah, well, and it's also fresh on his mind.
And we see more and more with so we saw some with the girls, all three of the girls, when they were doing their training in the White Tower, but more of that gets revealed later as they think back to it. Or major spoiler, you shouldn't be here if you haven't read them, when Egwene ends up back in the tower and has to go back through training and lessons, and we see how they are taught, not just what they are taught, but how they are taught. And it's the Brown sisters primarily, but then also some of the gray and white because of what their interests are. And they're not just teaching you the text, they're teaching you their interpretation of the text, which is often heavily colored by someone else's interpretation of the text. Rand has absolutely none of that.
I had a thought on that, and I was reading ahead and I lost it. It's also the fact that she would have read those so long ago and drawn her own conclusions, and it's the fact that she hasn't changed her mind as events are unfolding. He is reading them in the middle of events. So he's taking the environment of the day and applying knowledge to it, where she attained the knowledge and she is now thrust into the environment. It's a different progression when it comes to learning. Let's see. Let's go back to the smoking after we go through the Wheel of Time stuff. Never completely convinced that RJ didn't change Demandred. The storyline in the fan theories with Tame. Now, that's one of the things I have. Let me go ahead and just bring up, because in the annoying stuff, there were some good things in the annoying stuff. Now, this is the top 5 worst moments in the Wheel of Time. And some of them were annoying, but one of them actually is specific to this. Here we go, Tamandred. Apparently, there are sources, according to the comments, that that Sanderson revealed that in the notes, Jordan did change that partway through. So originally, Demandred was supposed to be Tame. But there's theories on why he changed it, that he was annoyed that he made it so obvious. So he just decided to change it, or he just literally just changed his mind. No one knows why, but apparently Sanderson revealed that in the notes, originally Tame was supposed to be Demandred. Now, it might have been because he was like, oh, we need a left hook to come in the big battle, so we need Shara. How do we get Shara in? And the two most obvious ones would have been Grendel, who's exotic anyways, and Tame, or not Tame, Demandred,
who's kind of the ultimate general.
We don't know where he is. Yeah.
And because he's the ultimate general of the dark. That
Well, at that point, he might have made the decision after the fact that we already knew where every other Forsaken was, except for him.
The main thing to me that gives credence to that is that even if it's really veiled, he pretty well sets up everything. There's so little nuggets of Shara that it's really hard to think. It's really hard to see that coming, like almost impossible to see that coming. Whereas, especially in hindsight, it's like watching The Sixth Sense for a second time, and you see all the clues.
Yeah. But at the same time, this is one of those good and bad. It just kind of came out of nowhere in the last book. But at the same time, it makes you think, well, why even mention them in the other books?
Well, there is one major thing that points at Shara that could have been the big Demandred setup, and but that would pretty much be the only clue, which is when Grendel is trying to point Sammy in that direction. And so that could be her trying to put Sammy and Demandred against each other, because that's what she does. Is she
but doesn't she make comments later that she's still wondering where Demandred is?
Yes, that's a good point.
Yeah, because then she wouldn't have known to do that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I forgot about that.
Which is why I thought she was the one that made sense to deal with the Shards. But the other, so let's do an alternate hypothesis, because the way Sanderson has handled so much with the movie or the video series and everything, he's kind of been a little bit snaky.
Yeah.
Maybe he changed it, and he wanted to make I mean, who else would know if he just said, "Oh, the note said this," other than Harriet?
Well, Harriet and Maria, I think was the main researcher. I think there was a second researcher that helped with keep all the notes together.
But maybe he made the change, and
that'd be a major change, though.
Well, and they agreed to it, and they just kind of did a little cover up.
Well, what was their evidence? Because there was a link there in that article of, so what are they referring to? Is it just comments from Sanderson?
Let's find out. I actually didn't click on it, so. Well, warning, spoilers. Well, we're in the spoiler section, so that's not a big deal. This talks about Asmodean being killed by Grendel, which was another thing that people thought was changed in this, because some people say Jordan originally wanted to be Demandred that killed.
The best theory I ever saw before it was definitively revealed, well before, was Grendel, and there's really good evidence to that. That I'll save it for when we actually get there. But the best theory I ever saw convinced me that it was her.
Let's see, the notes Robert Jordan created for the series were a work in progress, and most of them were written during or after the writing of Path of Daggers. By the time Jordan started going online and interacting with his fans regularly, that was after Crossroads of Twilight, and he ruled out Demandred. Okay, so this is just saying that he ruled out Tame and Demandred as killing Asmodean.
This was helped by a popular fan theory published in the late 1990s that pinned Grendel as the murderer, and it may be the fan theory that I'm specifically referencing.
Yeah, so this isn't evidence of what they're talking about here. This is about the Grendel theory. So whoever wrote this blog,
well, they're pointing to the Grendel theory as evidence of Demandred, because the main point for Time killing Asmodean was that if Demandred is masquerading as Taim, Asmodean would somehow recognize it. And so then he would need to get him out of the way, as well as just he's got a death sentence hanging over his head for turning traitor anyway.
Let's see if there's any more comments we want to do here. Faile doesn't know about them. I'd have to see what we were specifically talking about when he wrote that one. Okay, entire series takes less than 4 years. We were speculating on that.
I thought I remembered something in one of the last couple of books about 3-ish, like 3.5-ish or something like that. Somebody referenced sometime.
We covered this today because on accident.
Yeah.
see, Saldian culture. Read more. There we go. Okay, so he talks about the spanking, which we go to the top of the list here in the blog I just had up. Worst moments in the Wheel of Time. Number 5, Perrin spanks Faile.
It's one of my favorite.
Uh,
No, not for that, but
so they quote the passage there that you actually read out loud. It barely registered as a blip amongst greater happenings of the Wheel of Time as casual readers, but anyone who followed my reread most likely vividly remembers, she references herself there, generated by an outraged reaction to the revelation that Perrin had actually spanked Faile. The uproar was mild for internet discussion. Okay. And then she brings up commentary from someone else on why it basically infantilizes women.
okay, well then, do you also get mad when it happens to initiates of the tower? A lot.
Why'd you have to bring that up?
Oh, is that on your sexism article?
Yeah. Okay.
But
so
that's
let me get my-
women in authority spanking other young women, sometimes full-grown women.
So this article is 6 sexist themes from the early Wheel of Time books. Of course,
What the heck is that picture supposed to be?
that's Lan and
that's Lan.
Moraine coming out of a spot that we haven't gotten to yet.
I was confused because why does her hair have a reddish hue to it? That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, well, and it's also not in a braid.
Then the underwaterness. No, it's a braid. Do you see the braid there coming over her shoulder?
Oh, okay, I see it now.
That
Okay,
is a
right
thick
here,
braid.
right here. All right. Objectifying description. That's not the one. Slut shaming. Gender essentialism. Kink gone wrong was number 4 on her reasons.
What?
Because apparently Jordan had BDSM inclinations throughout the book, hinted at, and she speculates that's from his personal life, which if it is, who cares?
What?
If him and his wife
It's
are into that.
everywhere and it's really off-putting. What
Yeah.
the hell are you talking about?
Again, this writer here is the example of someone who loved the books when they read it and then went to school to learn how to hate it.
This is
So she brings up the Aes Sedai
ridiculous.
as an organization of women, and she talks about it and built on corporal punishments and other forms of humiliation. The wise ones are similar. And so she brings up.
Whoa, no, you're actually factually wrong there. It has nothing. There are times where humiliation comes into it. There is a major point way later in the books when Cadsuin figures out how to break Simirhaj. It's not the spanking, it's the bringing people in to watch her be humiliated. That's what does it to Simirhaj, because she's all about power and power dynamics. It's actually the exact opposite with the White Tower. The punishment happens in private, and you see a couple of times where the punishment is announced, and that actually annoys whether it's the Mistress of Novices or others, that's not right. Punishments and penance should be something that happen in private, and when it's done, it's done.
So let's bring this up. I agree with this statement on its own 100%. But in context to what she's talking about, no, because we have to think about the situation.
Yes, there's absolutely nothing sexual about the spankings that explicitly happen in the series.
Well, and
They
even
are
still,
corporal
let's go
punishment.
to the Perrin situation. Let's go to the Perrin situation. She is physically beating him. And in the moment, he takes control and it in essence beats her in another way, which wouldn't be the reaction I have, But also I'm not Perrin, and I'm not Perrin in that moment.
I
And
have to think this is someone who was never spanked as a child, and it shows.
Or was spanked too much and abused.
Or was spanked too much and abused. That's a good point.
But at the same time, or learned how to.
That's a good point. I think we've mentioned this before, but we grew up very differently because you grew up with an asshole stepfather who beat you, who didn't just spank you, but beat you because he felt weak and diminished by you. So whenever, the worst part about spankings when I was growing up was the lecture. My father never spanked us without first giving us a lecture on why. And I've mentioned before, there was one time where I so infuriated my parents, they didn't spank me because they didn't think they could do it objectively and rationally because they were so mad.
Mm-hmm. So this was much better covered in that first blog I brought up, because this girl, although with some slightly what I would consider flawed thoughts that are brought through education. What does Gad Sad say? It takes an intellectual to be this stupid. Something along those lines. But she at least tackles it from a different angle and is very reasonable, but you can also tell she's actually a fan of the books. The second one I brought up is someone who learned how to hate something.
Yeah.
Because it was written by a man. But let's break down the situation on why it's not sexist. So the things I agree with, he shouldn't have spanked her, but I'm not him in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a man who grew up in his time, in his way of upbringing, in love with this particular girl in a life-threatening situation while she's assaulting him.
Mm-hmm.
I am not all of those things. So from the outside looking in, I could say that was wrong. That was the wrong thing to do, and it was the wrong reaction. But how many times can we say we did the wrong thing in a crisis situation?
Well, even Perrin seems to regret it.
No, that's the second point I'm coming up with. Yeah. So I'm coming on there. And the second part is he actually knows he did something wrong. And that's what changes everything about that, what that article says, is it actually points out why he was wrong in the book itself, not someone commenting on the book. She's ignoring that part. That's the second half of Fine People. It's the part that they leave out that says everything. Now, the third part of it is, yes, it is infantilizing her. That's true. Spanking her like a child is treating her like a child. But at the same time, she was acting like a child.
Mm-hmm.
And his reaction was to treat her like a child. Again, we're not him in that situation, but we can break down the situation. We don't have to support the final product, but he actually learned from it. So that's the last part. He learned from it to say that was wrong. And sometimes you can look at the stupid thing you did and say, well, shit, I shouldn't have done that. And that's what changes you from doing it in the future.
As you pointed out, look at what he was reacting to, and it's she slapped him across the face so hard he saw stars twice. And then when she didn't get the reaction she wanted out of that, she balled up her fist and gave a good solid hook to the short ribs that made him double over and lose his breath. That was a full-on assault. And again, this is the author of the stupid woke piece is talking about sexism. That's sexism, a full-on felony assault, but it's okay because it's a woman doing it to a man.
Yeah, and again, I would like to draw differences between the two I brought up. The blog post with the 5 worst things also says it's because of her treatment of him. That is one of the worst moments too. So there's at least
it's not just what
egalitarian
thought provokes it. Yeah.
Now I will disagree with her that you're also trying to think of these things from a modern perspective. And we're not in a life or death situation. And you get into one of those and see how your emotions take over. And I can completely understand her reaction at the same time that I can understand his, and say they both had the wrong reaction, but who am I to judge?
So I don't know if you remember this, probably not, because you weren't a political nerd until very recently, and I was a political nerd way too young. So I paid attention to news and politics way too young. Michael P. Faile, I had to look up his name to remember his name. An American sentenced to 6 strokes of the cane in Singapore in 1994. Do you remember that at all? I mean, we were really young.
No, I
then,
do
but
actually do remember that, but that's addressed in the feminist article.
that specific incident?
Not that specific incident, but the fact that women are spanked on the bottom, implying sexuality, and men, every time they're punished in the Wheel of Time, is straps across the back or something along those lines.
That's actually because you're treating women softer. You idiot.
Which is sexist, by the way. You must punish them harder, but then we'll be mad at you for punishing them harder when that event comes around.
Yeah, great googly. Anyway, so I remember the shock and outrage at this, that how dare, they do this to this, and that and people incensed and insisting that the US government should step in and do something about it. His sentence was for theft of roadsides and vandalizing 18 cars over a 10-day period. He's not exactly an innocent kid here. He's a hooligan teenager, and he got a spanking. Yes, a very severe spanking, because getting hit with a cane ain't like getting hit with a wooden spoon. But this is the real world, people. This is the world that normal people live in.
Okay, so this is where we cross streams with the semi-woke crowds here. Look at when this was written. I highlighted it there. July 25th, 2020. She comments on the first 4 books. So we're in the middle of the last of her commentary. This was written in 2018. All right. One of her worst moments. Let me find it here. Oh, she's a Godwin hater too, by the way. I still don't understand that. The Faile haters and the Godwin haters. I don't like the way they finished Godwin, but he was okay up until then. Okay, so we've got one example here of why this is stupid, because we have basically female rape. And one of the sexist themes was that women weren't assertive in the books sexually. We basically have female rape there. But the one I'm looking for, here we go. This is the egalitarian complaints. Tylan rapes Matt. Women weren't assertive sexually in the Wheel of Time books was one of the feminist complaints. And we literally have a woman rape a man later in the books. You're picking and choosing, you're cherry picking. You're doing the first 4 books, which were basically up, except for the Egwene, Elaine, and Nynaeve perspectives, all male perspective. The first book is completely all male perspective.
We get a little bit of Nynaeve. You're right. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically all male perspective.
Because
which is funny, because the feminist author said the first book was the only one that was good.
And I was just thinking, I don't think any of that section with Perrin and Egwene, I don't think any of it comes from Egwene's perspective. I think it is all Perrin's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And then
because remember, he's thinking about having to try to kill her. And,
yep.
You know,
whenever it goes back to Moiraine and Lan and Nynaeve, then it's from Nynaeve's perspective, because we're still the outsider looking in. That's why Jordan uses her, because he doesn't want to give too much away of what's going on with Moiraine and Lan. Okay, I was digging around Thank you for making me do that. I hate you. So the stupid comment made me curious where Faye was caned, and it actually does. In the Wikipedia article, it details it, and because I was curious if he was caned across the back. No, he was caned across the buttocks. Okay, caning across the back is actually more severe because you have less padding.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know what the current publication is, but as of a few years ago, the APA, American Psychological Association, recommendation for spanking wasn't don't spank your kids like a lot of people think. It was, it has to be appropriate for the crime, basically, and do it with your hand on the buttocks, because
so you can feel.
So you can feel how much you're actually hitting, and the butt can take more than the hand. So if you're hurting from spanking your child, then it's probably too much.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why the buttocks is important, not because we're some Freudian slip of trying to be sexual with our children. Mm-hmm. And so fast forward that to here, they spanked people in the tower on their butt because they could spank them on the butt and they can still go about their daily tasks, mm-hmm. except for sitting, as they all say it hurts to do after Shiriam gets with them. So mm-hmm. That's the reason for it, you feminist wench.
Yeah.
This is on par with this is peer-reviewed publication too, of the woman who said, we understand mechanical physics better than fluid dynamics because men have penises. That was her dissertation, her doctorate. And she got a PhD and is probably in student loan debt, and is probably part of the problem. But this is someone who went to college to learn to hate things. We got to do insta love.
Well, before we finish on this, I did want to briefly jump forward from where we left off. So the very beginning of chapter 30 is, again, I understand being annoyed with Faile, especially early on, but I understand the Faile hate because of scenes like this, that she lets Perrin have a good long cry, and he feels embarrassed about it, but he's thinking through, he's thinking about his parents, he's thinking about his family, and then she doesn't talk again until he's let it all out. That, you know, let me just read it. Have you given up the notion of surrendering to the White Cloak? She asked. There was no hint in her voice that she had just watched him cry like a baby, which to Perrin is infantilizing, you know, what this woke feminist author is ranting about. But it's not. And certainly it's not to Faile. She does not think any less of him for this. In fact, she's the one who pushed him to it, because she knew that he had to let this out. He had to grieve. And so there's no, yes, she's much more emotional. She's much more extroverted. That's why I read that whole scene where she comes barging in, you know, throwing out all these, you know, wonderful addle-brained, lummox goat-brained insults at him for thinking, I'm just going to turn myself in, let the White Cloaks execute me, and that will be that. And, you know, so she's incensed about that, and yet she still cares for him.
Well, and this is actually important, because this might have to go into one of our social discussions as well later. But this is where Freud was right. Because when you're a child, you talk about Perrin being embarrassed about crying. That's where mother came in, right? Because dad is suck it up, buttercup, right? But mom is, let me hear what you're thinking. Go ahead and cry it out. In typical, obviously, again, disclaimer, overlapping bell curves, right? But that's where usually dad comes in, or at least the masculine figure in the family says, well, you still got to do this, or here's the steps to make that thing not happen again. But also the child is emotionally more stable if they have that shoulder to cry on. And that's if we have a healthy relationship as children, that's kind of what we look for in our lovers. And there's no surprise that Freud would be right, that we kind of find women that remind us of our mothers if we have a good relationship with a mother. Well, we do if we have a bad relationship, and that's how you end up Johnny Depp. But it's not a big surprise that same character trait is what we find in someone else and actually desire in our partner. And yeah, she was tough as nails to him, but she also supplied this need that he had at that moment in a compassionate way, whereas we're going to see with the males that are alive still, Tam and Abel coming up soon, is okay, here's the plan, bro.
Yeah. Well, and then, just a little later on in that scene at the beginning of chapter 30, then when Bran sticks his head back in, he's looking down. He doesn't want to, make eye contact with Perrin if he's still crying, because
he's ready. He's trying to figure out when to get to the next step.
Yeah. And he doesn't want to, because Faile sees absolutely nothing wrong. She's not going to treat him like a baby for crying like a baby, but there's going to be an awkwardness there. You don't want that masculine recognition of the fact that you were just blubbering like a baby. So Bran has his head down until he's sure that, all right.
But on the same time, at the same time, this is where Faile is redeemed. Like you said, how does this not redeem her?
Yeah.
She lets him cry like a baby, but she is not going to let him be nihilistic because of the situation. And that's where she's different. This overanalyzing everything has made me appreciate characters I didn't like before. Nynaeve was the first one, and then Faile was the second one. Galad, I didn't like the first read through, but the second time I read through it, I liked it. But I guess that's because I grew up a little bit. But yeah, that's cool.
All right, so now are we getting into insta-love?
Insta-love, yes. Okay, so this is something I do want to talk about in our other series, because it's part of kind of the problem we have with incel culture right now, and it's semi-spurred by social media as well. Because now, again, as I brought up at the beginning of this episode, I could have probably 1,000 women at my fingertip right now. But there's a difference, sorry, feminist writers, there's a difference between how men treat that and how women treat that. So when you have that much at your fingertips, men tend to swipe right 50% of the time. Is this attractive enough for me to want to get laid? Women are much more discerning on the other end of it, which makes sense from an evolutionary standpoint, because they have the biggest investment in having children, right? So, and as we talked about in our patriarchy episode just a couple episodes ago, where it would be different if it was actually a patriarchy, because men would be protective of that and trying to have multiple partners as well. So what we see with the advent of Tinder and then Hinge and the other variations of that is a shift in the Pareto distribution of mating possibilities. The top 10% of men get 90% of the women. Whereas in olden times, you didn't have as much selection. So if top man A was already married to top woman A, B got B, C got C, with little variations for personal preference. Whereas now top man A can match with A, can match with A minus, can match with B plus, can match with however low his standards go. And so
Five
man,
twos make a 10.
yeah, man C is getting maybe one match a week or one match a month, or even worse, never matching at all, because they're just not very attractive in what they say or picture on their dating app thing. So the dynamics have changed. So now let's flip that around. Now we're in a day and age with people who don't have exposure to a lot of other people, right? So the Insta love makes perfect sense. And again, if you want the physiology behind it, there's the book for you. It's like $15 on Amazon. Was John Bradshaw is the author. It's an easy read. It breaks it down pretty well. But here's the experiments that I would like any. Now, obviously, this is probably not good to do if you're in a long-lasting relationship at the moment. But any questioner of Insta love, we're spoiled by the amount of exposure we get to new people all the time, and a percentage of those people will fit into your attraction range, whatever that is for you. So not just physical. If you like blondes, brunettes, skinny, a little thick, big boobs, small boobs, big shoulders if you're a girl, big chest, or skinny jeans, which apparently I don't know why girls like that still, but you
Don't skip leg day, bro.
Pick your metrics from physically, but also now let's add a little bit of intellectually. So here's the experiment. Go somewhere where you don't know a lot of people. Now, obviously, take a couple people with you so you don't look like a creep, and then start talking to somebody you're attracted to, and then think of the future. So now you're going back to that place, and make note in your mind of that moment where you think of that person you talked to, and you're kind of hoping they're there again. So you've made a physical and intellectual connection one night, and then you go back to that same place a few weeks later, and you, in the back of your mind, you automatically think of that person. I bet you do. Unless you're just complete Mr. and Miss or Mrs. One Night Stand. I bet you do. Now go back into a day and age where you don't see a lot of people, you don't get a lot of new exposures to people. And realistically, because of hygiene standards and everything, not everybody's as attractive. So Insta love makes perfect sense.
Insta love makes perfect sense physiologically. It doesn't make sense to us culturally in this day and age.
Well, because we're just inundated with exposures. It's not new. It's not novel to us.
But it's more than that. And this is where I'll be the cranky old conservative, is that the expectation is that there's such a thing as getting married too young now. Now, certainly, obviously, you go back not that far, and yes, it is too young because you're not even a legal adult yet, is when you would get married. But I mean, it is now getting rare and odd to get married while you're in college, and that used to kind of be the standard, if not in college at that age, and now that's weird and abnormal, that it's expected that you'll get married around the time you're 30 or maybe even later, because we have infantilized, to go back to that word, adults in general. And so it's expected that, go live life, go have fun, and you'll figure it out. That doesn't work for most people, and that's certainly not the way it used to work.
Well, I agree with you, but I think that's only just a percentage of what's going on. I think the other part is we live in a world where you can get away with it.
Well, yes, yeah, it's not an either. It's certainly not an either or.
Well, this goes back to our Sexy Time with Sam episodes, where monogamy worked better when you paired up with somebody and you're reliant on each other for survival, and you're pumping out kids at a rate that creates basically this was different in hunter gatherers. I'm speaking to farming type situations. That's what my brain was like. You need to kind of quantify this a little bit. That's why I paused for a second. But your relationship is based on the environment around you and how your work together plus the raising of the children along the way creates that advantageous situation. So, you and I both grew up in a little bit of agriculture, right? And so you were helping on the farm, or you were helping in the garden, or you were helping with the cattle or whatever along the way. Whereas now that kid's just sitting there on YouTube playing away, and it has become a situation. I guess the long and short of it, it's become a situation where the relationship between the two parents is actually more important for the survival than it is for the family unit as a whole, because of modern technology and modern availability.
Well, what I was getting at is, and I should clarify this too, that expectation can create its own desire. So it's not that, oh, well, you're being forced into this. It's, well, this is what you know, this is what you've grown up with. So this is also what you yourself are looking to do. You are going to become a young adult. And now Jordan covers this at the very beginning of the series, in those first couple of chapters of The Eye of the World, when it's revealed that Gawain has braided her hair. She is now a young woman. She is no longer a child. She is now a young woman. So now it's expected, and even from her own mind, and then Rand kind of gets, oh crap, anxious and fidgety about this, because this means that this is no longer puppy love, that now we're talking seriously about courting and then marriage and then settling down. And to a certain extent, he wants that, but also to a certain extent, he's not ready to do that yet. But for most people, that's the plan. That's the expectation. In the same way that, even now, girls will think about their perfect wedding while they're still girls.
Well, this gets on the realm of nature versus culture, right? And that was the culture of the two rivers.
Yeah, but there's still that evolutionary, that biological element to it, is males and females are looking for each other to pair up, right? That there's still that element there, which is what leads to that attraction. So there is still that element of attraction and pairing up.
The nature of it would be pairing up for procreation, and then the best possible result from the procreation. The culture of it would be
the how
do we do that in our culture to do that best?
Yes.
And
then what happens afterwards?
Yeah. So you look at hunter-gatherer societies, you have basically either a semi-monogamous relationship where the man basically revisits his wife every 4 years or so to reprocreate, or has a new wife every 4 years. So it's,
I just had a thought.
In modern society, well, in semi-modern society, which like, again, this would be slightly pre-Enlightenment era, because what we see in later, in which book do we bring in the university? Is it 6? I think it's 6.
6, because it's after he conquers Cairhien.
Yeah, so that's basically the start of the Enlightenment era in this comic, which now that I'm thinking about it for a second, Jordan might be considering the Enlightenment as a turn of the wheel.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
So we're starting that about that point. So we're kind of just at the end of the Dark Ages here. So it's well, we're talking about culture. So the survival mechanism in that is to find, you're in a small village, it's to find that one person and then stay with that one person and create children, because some children die. So we need to make multiples, and then to raise them into someone who can make children. The best possible strategy for that in that environment is that nuclear family with a homestead, with cattle, with the farm and everything.
You've got that support structure, and then you've got what is most critical that, is our first world problem, which is food.
Yeah. And so we're in a different era. Like you said, our first world problem. Every issue we have is first world problems in the United States of America, unless you're just in one of those horrid situations where you're in an abusive or negligent situation. And so the best course of survival changed. Around the same time, we have options to no end. And one of the nature versions with female mating is what they call mate switching. And so later in life, sometimes females would look to mate switch, whether it would be to find someone who was better able to provide resources for their current children, or someone who was more desirable from a genetic standpoint than the person they were with before. And that underlying desire is still there, and everything's so available. We meet new people. Even if you don't get on the internet, you meet new people every day, all the time. And just the sheer number is going to have a percentage of people that fit your description of attractiveness.
That leads into what my thought was, is that it just kind of suddenly dawns on me that the problem that people have with Insta love is that we have a warped sense of love and a poor definition of love. But the concept itself, we still do. It's just Insta lust.
Well,
no, hold on. Let me finish this.
Yeah,
thought.
no, I think you're right with the terminology. The terminology is the problem. We have one word for it.
Yes. So what you see with, say, Perrin and Faile, for example, that's not really any different than if you go to a house party or a bar, or if you're just swiping, you're going with the expectation to meet members of, I was going to say opposite sex, but whatever, of meet other people with whom you are to whom you are sexually attracted and hook up. Well, it's the same thing here, except the expectation, both culturally and individually, is that you will not hook up, but you will pair up.
Mm-hmm. Phosphophenylalanine.
Well, and also the difference. So this is actually
that's the chemical that's released in your brain. That's a neurotransmitter.
Stop talking witchcraft. So I got this. This was an interesting discussion from Ben Shapiro way back when I used to listen to him before he got too annoying to listen to. But he actually laid this out, and I don't remember the technical terms that he used, but there are technical terms for this, for in maybe you know what I'm talking about here when it comes to psychology, that the problem people have with love is that they don't understand that it changes and shifts, and how what you feel and how you express it is going to change based on the, your own state of development, as well as the developmental state of the relationship. And so he made this point, and it's something we've actually talked about before, which is something that people get hung up on in this day and age, is this mythical romantic idea of the one. And just logically, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever that in a planet of 7 billion people, there's only
just one person
for you.
Yeah.
So stop thinking that way. What you're looking for is you're not looking for the best fit. You're looking for a great fit. Mm-hmm. And so stop thinking, is this person the one, but is this person a great complementary fit to me? And understand that when you first pair up, the love you feel is going to be very romantic. I think that's the term he used, is romantic love, mm-hmm. versus as it developed, I think the term he used was companionate love. So
it's almost the same language. that's
Okay.
in here. Yeah.
So that love is going to change, and we do ourselves a disservice now by saying, oh, well, the spark is gone. No, it's not gone. It's just changed. It's gone from that, when you, we were going to talk
Well,
about
okay.
smoking.
We were going to talk about smoking. I was going to say
smoking
it's the
coals.
roaring fire versus the coals. Yeah.
Now it's come down to
The
it
smoldering
hasn't,
coals. Yeah.
you don't need to pour more lighter fluid on that. No, that's what you were going for. It has to become that bed of coals in order to cook the meal.
But see, here's the problem with modern society is we have so many options every time we walk into a supermarket that even though you have smoldering coals, you can end up sparking a fire. And unfortunately, there's brain chemicals that make you not make good decisions in that situation. Now, but back to the books, they don't have that. Well, Perrin does because Barrelane comes along, but yeah, I would fall for Barrelane. I wouldn't fall for Faile, but I'd fall for Barrelane. Or Celine. Celine would have me. I could not have been Rand. I would be a dark friend.
I'm evil now.
Yeah, I'm evil now. See you later, guys. Savannah coming up is another one. She's that same kind. Yeah. Which was one of the complaints in the other one, which and I kind of agreed with. They held on to her too long. She was a big part for too long because she kind of fizzled out as being an interesting character. She was very one-dimensional.
Yeah. Which is fine at the beginning because that's what she's supposed to be. But then that entire arc, one of the reasons it's frustrating isn't just that it takes so long to resolve. It's that it takes so long to resolve relative to other things.
Yeah. And it realistically, if you really, really, really dig into it, it only existed to have Demandred and Grendel be more of a part. No, was it Samael?
Samael, yeah.
Samael and Grendel to be more of a part going into those other books. But then it went after those books. And then it went into another arc that everybody else hated, which is Faile being captured.
Yeah, and the way Perrin acts and reacts, yeah.
Yeah. Do we want to close it out?
Yeah, I think that's a good place to close it out, actually, because you just, that arc kind of does get annoying, but for the Faile haters and the insta love haters, the relationship itself is well written and does develop and evolve as it should.
And for those
that part of it is good and well written.
That knee-jerk reaction hate is the Amber Heard hate because she is on that spectrum. But again, I would stress that you can have positive effects for those personality traits and you can have negative effects. And the more survival is on the line, the more the positive effects show up versus, again, we're thinking in modern terms, whereas it just becomes a manipulative bitch at that point, right? So when we talk about he needed her to not be hung at the gallows, and she would not have gotten through with him unless she was that person. And again, just as you needed the raiding party to survive back in those days. And on the flip side, if you were a Saxon or an Anglo, you needed those people to defend you from the raiding party.
Yeah.
Because they had no problem going out and killing somebody, because as soon as you hesitate, you're dead. Right. So these are survival things that have survived through time genetically because they were useful. But now we live in a time where they're not useful. Just like we are addicted to Oreos because they are exactly the right amount of sugar, salt, and fat that we need to survive in a long-term situation where we might not eat for 5 days. But yet I can eat another pack 2 hours from now if I go buy them. So we're thinking of things in modern terms that in the world of Jordan, again, we're at the end of the dark ages. Your kid, 50% of your children die, right? It's not the same situation.
Yeah, I want to, I believe it was Edward the First's wife, Queen, crap, I forget her name. She had a child about every other year during their rule. She had 16 children, and I want to say only 6 reached adulthood or even made it into adolescence.
Yeah,
So
it's
6 out of 16, and this is the queen of the realm. This is the best care you can get.
yeah, it's going into the Industrial Revolution where you got above 50%.
Mm,
And that was only in some places. So it's
the world is trying to kill you.
all the time.
All right. Well,
All right. We actually went a little long on this one. So thanks, Scott, for sitting around. If anybody else did, comment. We do answer the comments, as you just saw.
mhm.
Oh, and yes, Scott, I do. I had a neighbor once that had a pecan tree behind us, and I used to take the leavings that fell. But I finished mine with hickory now because I get most of my wood from my mom's house in southeast of San Antonio, and hickory grows like weeds there. So
I use any hardwood, any especially oak as my base. But then I've got peach and apple trees, and I use the prunings from those to add to it.
peaches always add to the hardwood.
It's a good place to leave it off. We'll see y'all next time.
See y'all next time.